Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7 So we're going to talk about top takeaways from that solo featurette. And the first one I want to talk about with you is probably a little bit more theory than anything else, but quite honestly, I'm surprised that we haven't been talking about this yet. So there's a quote from Alden Ehrenreich, because a bunch of people get interviewed for this behind-the-scenes featurette, and one of the things he says is that this movie is all part of the great expansion of the Han Solo world. That's quote-unquote. And so the thing we're not talking about is whether this is the first of a bunch of Alden Ehrenreich Star Wars movies. Nobody has said anything about that. All we've ever heard is that these are standalone movies and that's it, period, paragraph, end of story. But, unlike Rogue One, where everybody died, spoiler alert, they couldn't necessarily make any more Rogue One movies. I mean, they could follow Jyn around, but they kind of covered that base with Rebel Rising. They could follow Cassian and K2 around, I suppose, and do a little thing with them, but not so much. But with Alden Ehrenreich, they've got a number of years prior to Han Solo's arrival in the cantina in A New Hope that they could explore if the movie goes well, if it's well received, if Alden's performance is well received. They've got a ton of opportunity there. And so the idea of Alden Ehrenreich saying, it's a great expansion of the Han Solo world, like that this is part of this expansion, is he actually hinting at the fact that there may be more Han Solo, Alden Ehrenreich movies to come? Or is he possibly hoping for it? Or is he just talking about the movie itself? I don't know, but if this goes well, why wouldn't Lucasfilm make more Han Solo movies with Alden Ehrenreich in the role of Han Solo? I mean, seems like a no-brainer to me. All right, the second top takeaway I want to share with you has to do with Ron Howard's comments in the behind-the-scenes featurette. So he talks about how the Empire has everything under, really horrible control. And then he says, but then we meet this incredibly free spirit. That's the phrase, incredibly free spirit. That's how he describes Han Solo. And you hear that kind of phrase, and it feels kind of shiny, happy people-like in a way, It doesn't seem to fit exactly with the criminal activity that we see Han Solo involved in at the very beginning. I mean, those shots of him tearing around Corellia in the speeder with Kira by his side, that's him in his youngest days that we're seeing him in the movie. And so, it struck me as very interesting to have him described as an incredibly free spirit in that regard when, there's definitely a criminal element to what he's up to. And as we all know, one of the main goals of this movie is to show us how a young Han Solo became, or at least got on the road to becoming, the man that we see in the cantina in A New Hope. And so to that end, we also have to talk about our third top takeaway, which is the combination of Larry Kasdan's and Emilia Clarke's comments in the behind-the-scenes featurette, because they are paired with each other and they talk about the character of Han Solo. Larry Kasdan says that he's always felt Han was the most interesting character in the franchise and talks about how you don't know what he's going to do next and how reckless he is. And then Emilia Clarke talks about his just bravado, how he always is doing things that have no idea, like he doesn't know what he's doing, and there's no reason why anything he's doing should work, and yet somehow he does, and he manages to pull it off. And so we're finding that is a very strong foundation for his character in general. And so it's really more about his idealism, and that's how it's been described in previous interviews, how his moral compass comes to be set and how it comes to be changed in significant ways, and in ways that will affect who he is when we meet him in A New Hope. Now, that's kind of enough for the behind-the-scenes-y kind of stuff, for the moment at least. We'll talk about one other thing that's really sort of off the table, as it were, as our seventh top takeaway. But the fourth top takeaway I want to share with you is the fact that we have, I guess you would say it's as close to a new scene as we've gotten so far. We get new shots of things like more of industrial Corellia and a little bit more of what's happening on Mimban, the mud planet, if you will, from Splinter of the Mind's Eye. But in particular, the big new moment that we get is some crazy worm creature coming out of a pool, and Han Solo is being brought to face this crazy worm creature, whatever it is, in some, underworld den of iniquity, and he's being shoved forward by a character who kind of sort of looks like it might possibly be Moloch, but Hard to tell because so far the only really good look we've gotten at Moloch is a Lego figure, so I don't think so, unless it's been showing up in Han Solo trading cards or something like that, which, it may have been. It may be showing up in Star Wars Card Trader, perhaps. Or I think there was a release of images from cards in France, something like that. It was a leak or a spoiler, something to that effect. Anyway, could be Moloch possibly, but it is the young Han Solo that we're seeing in this scene, the one who is closer to the 18-year-old side of things, the one who's driving around with Kira, the young Emilia Clarke, and getting chased by both Imperial patrol troopers and by that giant speeder that's being piloted by Moloch as well. So you have to think that there's got to be some relation to those scenes. We don't necessarily know how that chase scene ends, but you could try to extrapolate from this and think that maybe Moloch catches him and then drags him off to whatever situation this is going to be. And speaking of trying to reinterpret things, well, our fifth top takeaway has to do with the fact that Mimban is unfolding a little bit differently than we'd been given to believe based on the footage so far. So there was a scene in earlier footage where Han is in Imperial gear and he says, I'm a driver and I'm a flyer. And he's talking, very stridently to someone. And based on this new behind the scenes featurette footage where he's, talking more about being a driver and a great pilot, he's actually talking to Tobias Beckett, who is seen in the behind-the-scenes featurette in Imperial gear, as well as Val, Thandie Newton's character, is also seen in Imperial gear in this scene too. So now it seems like we have heists happening on at least 3 planets, because something's going on Mimbam if Tobias and Val and Han are there, right? They've got to be up to something. And then whatever snowy planet we're seeing that Convex on, that crazy double-sided train, that's a different environment. I mean, we're all operating under the assumption, the standard Star Wars rule that planet equals environment. So Mimban is not going to have a snowy area as well as a mud-covered area, right? It's going to be a different planet. And then we have Kessel, of course. That's going to be happening too. So we're going to see a lot of capers in Solo: A Star Wars Story, it seems. And there's one other thing that is new about a scene that we've already seen as well, and that's the fact that when we see Han and Kira reuniting in that swanky nightclubby atmosphere place, we didn't know that Chewbacca was in the room as well, but the behind-the-scenes featurette shows that Chewie is also in that scene as well. All right, the sixth top takeaway is Lando. And we've done top takeaways for previous footage released by Lucasfilm for the movie, and Lando has gotten his own top takeaway spot, I think, in just about every one. This time, we get his laugh, Donald Glover laughing as Lando, and it sounds exactly the way you want it to sound. I mean, it's just beautiful, and you can hear Billy D. Williams in his voice, even though, he's not trying to imitate Billy D. Williams. He's absolutely not. He's creating Lando as his own character, and as he should, because it's a young Lando as well, but you can hear Billy D. Williams in it, which I just thought was wonderful. And Han questioning him about how he got his ship, and Lando going, I like this kid. I mean, they should be about the same age, but Lando definitely is looking at Han as somebody utterly inexperienced in the ways of the world. And, it's not really the case in some sense, but maybe it is. Maybe there's a level of criminality and of scoundrelness that Han just hasn't experienced yet, that he hasn't achieved, but Lando seems already well on his way to doing that. And, of course, you can't neglect the fact that Lando is randomly kissing some alien's hand, just going, leaning over him, and, oh, what a scamp, what a scoundrel. It's all part of the vibe that they're creating for young Lando, and they're doing a fantastic job of it, if I do say so myself. Not being involved with the movie, so I guess I can say that myself. And it's not a big deal. Anyway, that would be our number 6 takeaway, that we are getting more of Donald Glover as Lando, just getting little pieces parceled out to us, and every piece so far has been fantastic. And then the 7th and final top takeaway is more about the inside baseball of this whole thing. It's really interesting to me that this was released on a Sunday again. So we have had a lot of stuff from Solo dropped on us on Sundays. The last trailer was dropped on us on a Sunday. And then, of course, Super Bowl Sunday with the commercial coming out. And then the full teaser came out the day after. But, Super Bowl Sunday, I mean, I guess you kind of had to take advantage of that. Maybe it was the first time they'd ever done it. But Sunday really seems to be a big day for big marketing pieces that are coming out for Solo: A Star Wars Stories, and it's rather unusual for Lucasfilm to be doing that. So, I don't know, it just seemed like something to flag for future reference. I have been looking at Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as the big days where they are releasing material. You go back to look at trailer release dates for The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and Rogue One. Most of that stuff, most of the major news announcements about those three movies happened on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. I think really the lone exceptions were the releases of the final trailers for each of those movies, because it was done during Monday Night Football in October for those. And, that kind of makes sense because that's A, ESPN, so it's a Disney network, and B, it's the largest cable audience on a weekly basis anyway. So, kind of makes sense why they would do it there. And that is going to do it for our 7 top takeaways from this Solo behind the scenes featurette. Over on the audio version of the podcast at sw7x7.com/iTunes, we're going to do Last Jedi trivia. So do check that out, iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. But for this video, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.